Okay, I'm supposed to be giving you the reading this morning, and I am going to, but I just have to smile. I'm thinking of the first time that Rick and I came into the church building over there 40 plus years ago. And I look back then and I look at today, and I am just full of joy for how we continue to grow together as a faith community. I love the spontaneity. 2011, is that right? Yes. My son Brian and 3 of his friends got together and wrote and recorded an album of music in tribute to my husband Rick and Jeremy King, who had both died very suddenly the year before. I listened to that CD yesterday, and the one song called Moments was based very specifically around the reading that we have today in Matthew 11. The style of the music back then was interesting, but some also very talented young men putting it together, and they wrote all of the songs. So they wrote the song Moments in recognition of this particular scripture from Matthew 11, verses 2 to 11. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who has come, or should we expect someone else?" Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, those who wear fine clothes are in king's palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.' Truly I tell you, among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist, yet whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." Thanks be to God.
This week, I was wondering if there was sunshine in the jail cell. Was there a fleeting shaft of light that John would use to mark his days while he was in prison? First century jails, of course, are nothing like the modern day jail cells that we might picture in our minds. There would be 4 square walls, is what we're expecting, maybe a window barred, but still offering light, or maybe even a stir of fresh air. We might imagine a meal tray slid under the door on a timely manner, or regularly scheduled time in the prison yard. The appearance of the jail cell that John spent his time in can only be guessed at. It was operated by by King Herod, rather than the Romans, so we could perhaps take that as good news. Mark chapter 6 and Matthew chapter 14 suggest that John was somehow able to get access to Herod. He was available to him for consultation or conversation. So maybe he was getting a better cell than the Apostle Paul spent his last days in. Even our reading this morning from Matthew chapter 11 suggests that John could send and receive guests and messages. He could ask Jesus questions, and his messenger could bring back a response. Is there sunshine in the cell? How does John keep hope alive while he's counting up his days of incarceration? Counting up is somehow worse than counting down. Doing time in jail, running down a clock towards an anticipated departure day, a long-awaited release, is one thing, but serving time, counting up the unnumbered days, has a weight of its own. How long, Lord? How long am I going to wait here? How long do I have to deal with this? Look, are you the real deal or not? Should we be expecting someone else? Hope falters when God does not seem to act, or does not act as quickly as we would like. How does John the Baptist keep hope alive? Many Christians that we've known have prayed faithfully and served faithfully and lived even sacrificially, and yet still struggled to find hope while they were waiting. Many have whispered some version of John's question: is Jesus, are you real? I mean, real in a meaningful way. Is this how God's kingdom actually comes? Churches and lifelong Christians may preach hope confidently, but struggle to receive it themselves. We hear hope, but we mistake it for optimism or a naive wish, a bravely detached whistling through the graveyard kind of thing. We want clear outcomes, visible victories, and immediate resolution. Not just selfishly, we want King Jesus on a golden manger, on a clear path to greatness. It's hard to wait for Jesus to come and to come through and to show us the way when he's so busy taking L's. Curiously, I know lots of Christians that are quite willing and even able to give hope to others, but are unsure how to receive it themselves personally. We often find ourselves waiting, and in waiting rooms, prisons of illness and pain, injustice, anxiety, burnout, and grief. Sometimes it's a phone call that leads to a doctor's appointment, which leads to a waiting room, which leads to a diagnosis, news of cancer's return, or something else new and uninvited. Now, don't get me wrong, Jesus sits with us in the dark. That's one of the things that convinces me that Christianity is real. That's one of the things that my hope hangs on. Proof that Jesus is real. The Bible takes sin seriously, and the Bible takes evil seriously and accounts for it in the world in ways that other religions just don't. God enters into suffering. He knows what it's like. So what we don't see here in Matthew chapter 11 is Jesus rush in to flip on the lights in the jail cell and try to cheer John up. Jesus praises John the Baptist, but he invites him to look and to see. But he leaves him in jail. I confess, as a natural cynic, I'm not ready for joy to the world quite yet. Not this week. I'll get there, but I'm just not there this week. I do appreciate, however, how in Matthew chapter 11, how Jesus keeps hope alive in the dark. We can take courage that Jesus does not rebuke John for doubting. He doesn't rebuke him for asking the question. Jesus offers hope without shame. He answers the messenger, "Go back, tell John what you see and what you hear." Hope is reframed then, not always with a spectacle, but with faithful presence. Jesus says the blind receive sight, the lame walk. Those who have leprosy are cleansed. The deaf hear and the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed, we see in verse 5. All these amazing things are first proclaimed, however, in the book of Isaiah, hundreds of years before Jesus was born. In Isaiah chapter 35, he predicts that when God's deliverance comes, it includes the eyes of the blind will be opened, the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then the lame will leap like a deer, and the mute tongues shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness, streams in the desert. Isaiah 35, verse 5 and 6. In fact, Jesus' first sermon that's recorded in Luke chapter 4 quotes from Isaiah 61, where it says, "The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for captives and release from the darkness for prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." That's Isaiah 61, verse 1 and 2. Jesus then said, to the amazement of the listening crowd, "This story This prophecy has been fulfilled right now. John would have recognized the text. John would have known what Jesus was talking about. He would have seen the connection. But I'm sure John would have probably thought, well, where's the freedom for the captives then, Jesus? Where's the release of the prisoners? Jesus is saying all this is taking place where? Jesus' word of grace to us this morning comes with the reality that hope does not require certainty. That's not how hope works. Hope requires simply openness to God's unexpected work. Theologian Karl Barth in his office had a wood carving hundreds of years old that depicted on one side John the Apostle caring for Jesus' mother at the foot of the cross, and on the other side John the Baptist holding a book and with a bony finger pointing up to Jesus on the cross. Barth famously said that this picture captures the heart of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, pointing to what God has done through Jesus on the cross. Jesus goes on to say more about John the Baptist. He asks the crowd, what did you go out to see? What did you think you were coming out here for? A gentle reed that just blows this way and that based on the wind? Did you come out here to see a sharp-dressed man? Or did you come out here to find a prophet, a messenger of God? Jesus says that's what John was, and he was the best. He kept pointing to Jesus in the midst of his own suffering. John kept pointing to Jesus even from a jail cell. He kept pointing to what Jesus was doing rather than what he was getting done. He kept the faith. He held on to hope even when it was still dark. I'm encouraged this morning that hope is not pretending that everything is okay. After all, Jesus works in weakness. God does some of his best work through suffering. And Jesus reminds us, blessed is anyone who doesn't stumble on account of me. Hope is optimism with a broken heart. It lives in sight of suffering. In fact, it's defined by it. Hope, though, is defiant. It is a dissenting, insubordinate spark that refuses to be extinguished in the face of suffering. Optimism is often guilty of denying the existence of suffering. It can sometimes be afraid of the dark, scared to face the truth, but hope is wizened optimism. Optimism that's experienced the suffering of this world, but is grounded in something deeper. It rejects pessimism and cynicism and nihilism as being too cheap, too thin to account for the depth of wonder and joy that's in the world. At least that's what Nick Cave says. Nick Cave is not a theologian or a pastor, but an Australian songwriter whose work has explored themes of love and violence and doubt, grief, and God. Over the course of his life, he has endured profound personal loss, including the death of 2 of his sons. And rather than turning away from faith in the face of that pain, Cave has leaned into the question of whether hope can survive devastation like that. During COVID, he started a website called the Red Hand Files, where people could ask questions of deep significance, and then he would take a stab at answering them. So in 2022, one of the readers wrote, "Following the last few years, I'm feeling empty and more cynical than ever. I'm losing faith in other people. I'm scared to pass these feelings on to my son. Do you still believe in humanity?" And Nick wrote in response, "You are right to be worried about the growing feelings of cynicism, and you need to take action to protect yourself and those around you, especially your children. Cynicism is not a neutral position. And although it asks almost nothing of us, it is highly infectious and unbelievably destructive. In my view, it is the most common and easy of evils. I know this because much of my early life was spent holding the world and its people in contempt. It was a position both seductive and indolent. The truth is, I was young. I had no idea what was coming down the line. I lacked knowledge, the foresight, the self-awareness. I just didn't know. It took a devastation to teach me the preciousness of life and the essential goodness of people. It took a devastation to reveal the precariousness of the world and its very soul, to understand that it was crying out for help. It took a devastation to understand the idea of mortal value. It took a devastation to find hope. Like cynicism, hopefulness is hard-earned. It makes demands of us. It can often feel like the most indefensible and lonely place on earth. Hopefulness is not a neutral position either. It's adversarial. Hope is the warrior emotion that can lay waste to cynicism. Each redemptive or loving act, as small as you like reading to your little boy, or showing him a thing that you love, or singing him a song, or helping him put on his shoes, keeps the devil down in the hole. It says the world and its inhabitants have value and are worth defending. It says the world is worth believing in, and in time we come to find that it is so. I have a tendency to be cynical, but the words of Scripture tell me better. The Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 8, we know that the whole of creation has been groaning as if in pains of childbirth right up to this present time. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we eagerly await our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we are saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. I mean, who hopes for what they've already got? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. Paul says hope is born out of suffering and loss. Nick Cave says that hope is an emotional temper that emboldens the heart to be active. It is a condition, a mood, an aura of being. It is a feat of imagination, both courageous and ingenious, a vitality that inspires us to take innovative action to defend the world. Hope is essential to our survival and our flourishing. The Christian faith teaches us that hope is not naive. Hope is not hope has an earned understanding of the sad, corrupted nature of reality, but still rises to attend to the world like something that matters, something that God still loves. God still loves the world. And if you're a follower of Jesus, if you are a Christian, then cynicism and bitterness are things to be confessed and repented of rather than celebrated. We are not excessively cheerful as Christians, but we wear hope on our sleeves. Christians are gritty and resilient in the face of despair and darkness. Christians hang in. If despair is the stagnant rejection of life itself, then hope is the supreme gesture of love, a radical, audacious duty that grows out of a God who sees brokenness and comes near anyway. Hope is a gift that we give to the world. But this morning, I want to encourage you to also see hope as a gift that we should receive. It is hard to lead someone to a place you've never been. And likewise, it is difficult to share hope with anyone when you have none yourself. This morning, Jesus speaks a word of hope for you. In spite of brokenness, in spite of darkness, in spite of betrayal, Jesus invites you to open your hands and receive the gift of hope. Breathe. Receive. In the knowledge that God knows, and God is working even now.